All right, today is October 11th, and we're continuing our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. And we'll start off today with Gary, who had a question from last week regarding the ripeness is all. Oh, Gary, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I'll start again. Hugh, I wasn't sure how to start off. Uh, I thought going back to spiritual kindergarten is that, you're sitting there. I mean, I'm just saying this, suggesting this thing called the ripeness is all, and people listening to it and thinking, oh, this sounds like something I've got to do, I've got to attain. And then it's kind of like the impossibility of the spiritual quest, that the I that would have this is not the I that can do anything about it. That I is a fiction, it's a thought, it's not an agent, it can't do anything. So, I mean, you want to start that far back and just address that point of the kind of fact that something's got to change, but I can't do it.
Yeah, so the great irony of spiritual progress and enlightenment is that it's a journey to nowhere. Now, everybody's so goal-oriented in our society that they think, well, why do you want to make a journey to nowhere? It's kind of like you were just talking about the Australian flights to nowhere. It's literally like that. It's like T.S. Eliot said, basically it's to return to where we started from, but know it for the first time. And so that's really what it is basically you start out on a journey that really leads you to, like Sam Vaknin said, that, it's basically a journey to nothingness. So it's always filled with irony and paradox, because in Hinduism, they say it's, like discovering a snake in the dark or tackling a snake in the dark, and then you discover that it's only a rope. So that's very easy to misinterpret. What they're talking about there is Leela and the universe, and saying, what is the universe? What am I experiencing, and who is experiencing the universe? And in the end, you come back to something where you just say, I am just the universe experiencing itself. One of the great sayings that physicists often say is, a physicist is just an atom's way of studying itself. And that's really pretty Zen right there. And so we are literally, the universe is obviously capable of consciousness, and it's expressed in us. And it's the only way the universe can actually see itself is through the eyes of a primate like us, really, in the way that we see it. And so you say, well, what is it all about? And it's a journey of discovery that just leads you to exactly where you were in an embodied experience when you started with. But it's completely transformed. You don't see it as the snake anymore. You just see it as a rope. So the idea is that you don't see the universe as a big thing and you are a little homunculus running around in it, but you see it as really a dream, and you're the dreamer and the thing being dreamed. So there is nowhere to go to, but there is a strange thing of actually removing ignorance. So the thing about the snake in the dark is all about removing ignorance. Going over and touching the snake to find out that it's just a rope is about removing ignorance. So it's really difficult, because any one of the great sages would say that there is nothing to be done. There is no journey to be made. But go and do it anyway. They don't want students to then kick back and do this false thing, saying, oh, there is a kind of a delusional thing that's very common, especially in these kind of fake gurus, and it's in New Ages. And you see this a lot in doomerism, where people go, oh, it's all just cycles. And even if human beings went extinct, another 1,000,000 years and something else would come up. And it's all rather fake. They're not really thinking realistically in terms of, animals involved, the real planet, this basically the earth under their feet. they're talking about some abstract thing that's vaguely David Attenborough and there's vaguely Blue Planet-ish, and they're talking about a Zen that comes out of books. They have no clue about the real, what they would call illusion or lila, the experience of the universe. They're not talking about this universe. They're talking about a substitute idea of the universe in their head. So you don't want people like that to stay in that state. That's called makyo. It's called the devil's cave. It's basically they're cashing in before they've actually managed to, basically solve the puzzle. It's almost like somebody that has a maths puzzle in front of them, and they manage to get the answer, but you can see from their workings that they haven't really understood the problem. That kind of thing that you often got in maths class. There would be something where, I had a maths teacher in school that would always give you 0 if you came up with the wrong answer and you couldn't show it from the workings. And people would go nuts. And they said, but I got the right answer, because what they're saying is, I'm a Westerner. It's all results oriented. If you got the right result, then who the fuck cares about the process? And you say, well, the process is the important thing. It's not coming to the answer. The answer is almost a given. It's basically, if you have a look at Maxwell's equations, they all net out to null, to 0. They're like a balance sheet on a company. That if you balance out a company, it's kind of a beautiful Zen thing in the middle of capitalism, is the balance sheet of a company nets to 0. Every balance sheet does. Well, after you've said, basically accounted for all the commitments of a company and its assets, you net to 0. That's how accounting works. And that's how Maxwell's equations work. So coming to the conclusion and say, oh, well, it's all nets to 0. And you say, yeah, but how does it net to 0? Well, they haven't got Maxwell's equations. That's what they need to go away and find Maxwell's equations. Then you can come and say, okay, now I understand. It's nets to 0, and now I know why. And so that's what you need students to go and do, and that's the journey to enlightenment. It's not enough to just pop out with the answer. Does that make any sense at all? Did I answer?
Yeah, in a way. But you can see that people get caught between they're caught out because you're talking about something that they have no experience of, and that they can't have the experience of it until after the end of their journey. So in a certain sense, anyone who's listening is got to take a leap of faith and assume that there's this thing called ripeness there, and that you're not just a pile of bullshit, because I want to just try and tie in something that Sophie wrote, which is similar, I think, is that you can't work towards this, but yet there seems to be some value in listening to people who know about it or who have arrived in this state themselves. There seems to be some value in that. That's worth doing. So you're kind of paying attention to that. But in paying attention to, you realize that the only way that those people can talk about it is in metaphors, which are prone to being misinterpreted. And I wanted to just tie that in because, Sophie, you wrote somewhere about gradual enlightenment. I can't think exactly what it was now, but I mean, that's Hugh has denied that. He's saying that it's a psychotic break. It's this eupsychosis. It's that it's just a sudden cracking of your ego identification. But I'm wondering whether there might be a slow enlightenment in the sense that it's like a pressure cooker, where you've screwed down the relief valve and you keep heating it up, and you're just sitting there looking at the pressure cooker and nothing's happening and nothing's happening and nothing's happening, but it's getting hotter and hotter the whole time, and then suddenly it explodes. You could say that's the parallel to the eupsychosis or the whatever. And you could say that in a way that's a gradual awakening, because what's been going on inside the pressure cooker of your head, so to speak, is that you've been listening to people like you or people like Sam Backman that we were talking about, and it's been working away there somehow. I'm thinking more as at a subconscious level rather than trying to deal with it with your mind. But after it's all been going in and going in and going in, and then at some point, does it sort of come together inside you?
Yes, so that's a very good analogy. It's often an analogy is another analogy other than the pressure cooker is that it's like a kettle, and big kettle, like a big cauldron, and you basically get these insights drop by drop by drop by drop, and then suddenly the kettle is full, and the next drop it overflows. So that's another analogy. Another analogy that they give is particularly to Hindu monks is that they have an ochre robe, and they dye the robe, basically many times. So they put the robe in the dye, boil it, take it out, hang it up to dry, take it off the line, put it back in the bowl, and they keep on doing that until suddenly it is this rich ochre robe. The important thing is that it's not like a tree growing where you get a lot of fake gurus out there. A good way to sort out fake gurus from real ones is to ask them about enlightenment. And if they talk about it as a gradual process that eventually you become enlightened, like an acorn grows into an oak tree, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. You should turn and run. Basically, it's a very it's an explosive experience because of what you led into, and that's what you mentioned about the leap. It's more than a leap that people have to take for this. It's suicide to your ego, or what I'd call your alien cortex, or your idea of self that is going to die. So to that part of your brain, it is literally the death of it. So it's not by most people's definition of me, that me is going to disappear. So it would be wrong to say that it's not suicide. It is literally most people's definition of suicide. When a common or garden person takes a gun, puts it to their head and blows their head off, their intent is to kill that me. That here you just do it metaphysically and psychologically, but it is the same effect. Afterwards, you don't exist in the same way. So it happens suddenly because you're really wiring up your brain your whole life, right from when you start discovering things, and by touch and feel, and then by dialogue. You're always experimenting up until about the age of 5. You have this basic neural skeleton that we have the instinct to build up. At the age of about 5, you get a neural crash. Basically, most of the neurons in your brain disappear. What's left is a connectome that then you will build. It's the framework that you'll build on the rest of your life. Every experience after that, you kind of placing like a decoration on a Christmas tree on that kind of skeleton that you build up, really up until about the age of 4. So most people will never get rid of that tree. That's a map of the world that they will just develop incrementally all their lives. Now, this is a total scrapping of that model. So there's tremendous resistance to it. People don't want to do that leap. It's very strange because it's only quite intelligent people that can do it. And it's almost stupid. They're almost stupid at the same time, because if you get people that are smart enough to smell it coming and they run. So you can see people, will get close to this sort of stuff, and instinctively they go, some part of their brain goes, oh, I know what's happening here. I come out of this like a meat grinder. And then they find excuses to duck out real quick. So it's kind of the people that are too stupid to back away from this thing that's going to kill them. So, but you can only do it if you really smart. So it's kind of
again, you're in the person who aspires to this is in a paradox. I think I remember Krishnamurti making a similar sort of comment that the intelligent person was going to be the one who was least likely to pull off this stunt. They would.
Oh yeah, well,
They
that's also because of the intellectual part. Because they
yeah,
basically, what's at stake is what I call the alien cortex, and the alien cortex is combative, and it's really a self-preservation machine. So what it'll try and do is it'll try and preserve itself, and so it's almost only people that don't have good self-preservation instincts are good for this kind, are basically candidates for this kind of thing. But
yeah. That's what I was thinking about. I think they divided devotees up into. It's like the different schools of yoga, but it seemed that the people who were the bhakti, the people who were devoted, might have stood a better chance than the ones who were sort of into uh, the knowledge raja kind of aspect of it, because the devotees would be tending to be more just simple-minded, and they wouldn't have the barrier. They wouldn't have that what you're saying, the kind of expectation of what could happen, and building up sophisticated defenses.
Yeah, so this is only really available to the jnanis. So the jnanis are intellectual. They're basically guys that have an alien cortex. Then they can lose the alien cortex. But the bhaktis are just devotional, and then everything's for love. And so they have a pure heart. And so it's kind of like, well, you don't have an alien cortex to lose almost. So that's it's half and half of, you're kind of cured already, so you don't need the medicine. And also in some ways you don't have the aptitude. So, but there are two ways that people come to this. Often people exhaust that kind of tree that I was talking of, because it's really a tree of ego, and people get to the point where they exhaust their ego. So one of the ways to do it is if you achieve everything. So, basically, if you Alexander the Great and you conquer the whole world, it's like, where do you go from here? You've got nowhere to go from. People that have often done great things get to that point. If they become super rich and they fulfill all their ambitions, then they're like, where did they go to next? So that's one extreme. And the other one is where they reach rock bottom, where they lose everything. They have nothing left to lose. And then they think, well, they kind of don't have an ego from that point of view. And then they ask, well, what the hell's it all about? A lot of people have a kind of midlife crisis later kind of thing. But it really helps if you have that midlife crisis real early. It really helps you if you have it pre-20s. Unfortunately, people often wait, and then, in their old age, it takes a lot of energy to pull this off. So it's better done young. You don't want to say too much to discourage people, but it is a young person's game.
Yeah, I'm just.
I didn't understand what you said there. Is it a young what? A young person?
It is a young person's game. Yeah, you need. Yeah, it's very dangerous when you get older that you get overripe, and then the other thing is you don't have the energy to reconstruct the whole world. You've taken a lifetime with the map you've got. It takes more than a superhuman effort to throw away the map.
I'm just wondering. Yeah, but again, so we're still. I think we're still caught here, because you're saying, well, you're still talking in language of, well, this is what you've got to do while you're young, and it's better to do it, blah blah blah. But somebody's going to say, do what? What do I specifically fucking do?
Yeah, well, they should well ask that. What it is actually is ask, who am I? It's really a question of the big question. So nobody really knows how to ask questions or deep questions anymore. Especially as you get older, you struggle to even think what the deep questions are. And then eventually you get to, scientists, physicists now, and say, why is there something rather than nothing? And then they think of it in terms of well, matter and antimatter, and you know this is going nowhere. They're just trying to extend the knowledge they've got. But if you think really the question that's asked is, you know, the very naive questions that we ask when we're young is, why are we born? Why, what, in Nachiketas in the Upanishads asks, what launches the whole of Hinduism, in effect, is asking is, what God opened eye and ear? So why am I conscious? Why is anything conscious? What's the point of it? And what is consciousness? The very naive questions. What is the world? Why does it exist? Is there a God? And it's very easy to forget a pure naivety of the question. But if you pursue it to its logical end, you get to a place where your alien cortex breaks down. So it puts it in a double bind. And if you put somebody in a double bind, they can't be neither here nor there, and then they snap. And then that snapping, then they suddenly realize how everything is. And then that's the liberation or enlightenment. But that's when the work really starts, after that. So in general, they, you know, in terms of New Age, let me put it in terms of New Age philosophy, just to annoy hard-headed rationalists. But that point is only the third chakra. So in terms of the octave, as you know, the Pythagoreans, they, you know, when they developed the octave, it was far deeper than just, you know, inventing music in the pentatonic scale or solmization. What they were doing was mystic solmization. So the Pythagoreans were thinking in terms much like Ken Wilber of having phases of development, and then they thought that the human soul migrates towards metempsychosis, really, but they assumed that it did it in these harmonic intervals, and so, you know, that's what they were doing. And then this is really the semi-interval between do, re, mi, and then fa. So between mi and fa, there's a kind of an interval, and then that's what they reckoned as, you know, realization or enlightenment. That tradition, I don't know if you're interested in that kind of thing, but that tradition was carried on in secret, even through the Renaissance.
No, I mean, I don't. I'm just looking at it from the point of view of how they sort of divide the lower three chakras from the upper three, with the heart being the central sort of changeover point. I mean, I don't know if that connects with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not something physical, right? It's basically by what dominates you. So the better way to think of it is like a layer brain theory, like I put out, and then think that basically you move from a point where your alien cortex is not dominant anymore. It's really subordinate. So from people outside, they may just think, Christ, you're a wacko. But what really happens is what it feels like is you're no longer subjective. You're objective from that. So you're basically, your sense of observation is kind of elevated, as if you are watching yourself as an observer. Most people are not. They're almost animalistic in the fact that they're reactionary and they have, you know, just stimulus response. It's very much like on social media. You can give one stimulus, you know what the response is going to be. I mean, I would even, on a lot of the things I post, just to be controversial, I pre-prepare responses because I knew exactly what the responses will be. People are almost mechanical. And so I could just cut and paste them in just within a second of the people actually writing them. And so the reason is they just are operating from a very mechanistic point of view, and that, you know, is ego, and then it's me. You do this to me, I do that to you. It's very much that, and it's I'm under attack, I respond to, it's me and you, and you know, this is the normal thing. And so then you no longer see that. Then you can see yourself even engaging in that, but you don't identify with it in any way. You look at it like you know, observing yourself from the ceiling, going, I'm such a fucking nut. Look at me arguing with that person. There's a new person inside you. And so Gurdjieff actually called it a third brain.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, I haven't lived the kind of life that's had a lot to do with other people, but I can see like you have, and Sophie, obviously, because of your work and that. And when I hear you talking like that, I sometimes think to myself, "My God, are a lot of people really that far gone? Are they just so completely lost in themselves? Is it really like that?
Buddha said that.
I have trouble
Looking at
really
the average
accepting it."
person, Buddha said that looking at the average person, they look like fish just writhing in a puddle.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
mean, if you look on social media, that's a brilliant metaphor for it's just people writhing in a kind of agony. It's a prison yard, basically. They're just people writhing like fish in a prison yard. The people are really, really far gone.
Um,
I wanted to
did,
say something. So sorry, go ahead. I remember that you posted something about the story of the bull that's used in Zen tradition very recently, I think yesterday or today, when we were talking about enlightenment. Yeah, when I wrote Gradual Enlightenment, I was thinking about that more like the I wrote something saying that enlightenment was in the practice. I mean, it was the process. I was kind of associating enlightenment to the process itself. And I love that sequence of the bull because it kind of it's a very, very good way of showing what I meant when I was saying that, you see.
I often post that because there's so much in it. But the thing that I'm talking about is the taming of the bull. So there's a definite moment. If you've ever tamed a horse or a donkey, I had a pet donkey when I was younger. And if you tame the donkey till it rides, there's a point where the donkey gives up and you can ride it. And horses are the same. There's a definite point where you establish that you are the boss and then you can ride it. The horse is not going to struggle anymore after that. And so it's doing the same thing with your alien cortex. There's a definite point where it's tamed and you become the rider. And then it's all about riding home on a tamed buffalo. But that buffalo is a metaphor for your alien cortex. Yeah. But you see, the important thing is just to see it at first. The reason why I just introduced the concept of the alien cortex is just to freshen up a very, very old concept. So if you say ego or something, then immediately your alien cortex says, oh, I know ego. I've got that in the bag. And you say, no, if you've got that in the bag, that's wrong. We don't want you to pigeonhole this. This has got to be a fresh concept. So you need to freshen up the salad a bit and come up with a new concept. And people go, alien cortex? What the hell's that? That's the attitude that you need. If they think, I know all about it, they're already shut off. All the blinkers are up. And then you miss that important thing, that it's seeing the bull. So it's so fabulous that it's a bull because, we're full of bull. Everybody's full of bullshit. And it's almost so apropos because it's suddenly that you can get to a point where suddenly everybody goes, it's not about being socialist or capitalist or about Trump or me or left wing. It's like we're all full of bull. We're all full of bull. I must go for the bull in me. And you say, yes. You finally got it. That's the work you need to do. You don't need to join XR and change the world. You need to go after the bull in you. But you can only see that when you see we're all full of bull. So it's such a wonderful metaphor. But how many people get to that point where they say, oh, hang on a minute. I understand here. This is a problem we all have. And they say, I've got to start with me. I'm useless to the world. I mean, how can I fight climate change? Because you just get into Hegelian dialectic. The whole system is homeostatic. And so as soon as you come out with a thesis like, the planet's doomed, we need to do something, well, you can guarantee our alien cortex is designed from evolution to have an antithesis to that. Because there are good reasons why a social species like us doesn't run off the rails and start going Hitler and stuff. We wouldn't last very long unless we were homeostatic. Homeostasis is very important for survival. Problem is that where we've got to is a place where we need some symmetry breaking. Now we need a radical departure from homeostasis. And you can't do that by doing a thesis saying, we need to change. That's my thesis. And they say, well, I got another antithesis. We don't need to change. And then basically, from that, you normally get a synthesis, which is the Hegelian dialectic. A synthesis can't save us. A synthesis is the Green New Deal. It's like, I say there's no climate change. You say there's, climate denial. Well, we'll synthesize it and say, oh, there's an economic solution where we have a win-win. There's no win-win situation to this. This is, extinction. So when people realize that, then they realize, well, we aren't going to get anywhere. I'm never going to change, basically Peter's never going to change Paul, and Mary's never going to change Margaret. So you have to stop and say, okay, where's the problem? And you say, well, it's flicking in all of us. And then, well, I'll start with me. Now, how many people get to that stage? That's step one. So you see why we're screwed. I think we're going extinct. And the reason is we can't even get off the starting blocks. We can't even make the basic thing. Getting to like step 3 or the third chakra and saying, basically defeating our ego is so, oh my God, it's like the Olympics, But you can see people that have done it in relation to people that haven't. Like, for example, it's Jung and Freud are a very interesting example, because Jung clearly made it over the third octave, and Freud didn't. Freud got stuck in the ego and me. A lot of the stuff that he wrote is disparaged now because it was idiosyncratic. He was really just talking about himself. Now, the interesting part about Jung is if you trace it back carefully, he hid it very, very carefully because, it was of his time and he was a psychiatrist, but he had a psychotic breakdown. So he had a clear psychotic break that he hid. And so he gives lots of hints for people that are, in the know. But if you look at his red book and stuff, you can place all the pieces together. I think while he was in the Swiss Army, serving in World War I, he had a psychotic break that he hid from all his colleagues in the world. But it gave him tremendous insights. But from there on out, he was, kind of through the looking glass, talking to all his colleagues on the other side. And Freud was one of the guys on the other side of the mirror, so to speak.
Here, can I ask something? I mean, there's the assumption in these discussions people participate in that they are not awakened. You seem to have done something or have something that I haven't got and these other people haven't got. And I just I mean, if you don't want to explore this, it's all right. But there's kind of two questions. One is how do I know that I'm not awakened? And the second question is, could a person actually be past their ego and just not know anything about it? It's just normal for them.
I'm not really sure on that point. If somebody can really kind of just be born enlightened, I think it is probably possible, but I don't know of any clear examples. The way you know that you're enlightened or not is if everything makes sense. So if there's still big mysteries, then you know that you haven't got the pieces to your puzzle. But when you put the puzzle together, then you have then you can see that where everybody's missing pieces, where people have all their pieces all over the floor, where people aren't bothering to assemble the puzzle. But the problem is that when you assemble the puzzle, you can't really communicate it very easily because it's Douglas Adams kind of thing where, it's like the answer to life, the universe, and everything is kind of like 42. It's kind of like, yeah, well, we all one or something like that. And you get to a point very much like Valerie said, is everything that's simple is false and everything that's complicated is useless. So if you explained the whole puzzle to people, but you couldn't do it in a lifetime, and nobody has time. And then the alien cortex, as soon as you start down that path, it goes like, oh, I know where this ends up. This ends up with me dead. Hey, look at the time, I gotta go. People find excuses. You'll get interruptions. The clock will run out on you if you give people the long version. If you give people the short version, and then it just sounds trite and crap, and say, "Oh, we all won." Oh, yeah, well, okay, Mr. Zen. Anyway, they can't hear what you just said. So somewhere between there is salient information. So there's one is too much information and one's kind of too condensed, and somewhere is the salient information that they can handle. Now, what they can handle is very personal, and it's important that they actually ask a question. So most people are not enlightened because they don't have the answer, and they're not asking the questions, and they don't realize. Most people don't realize there's a question to ask. And in fact, our society goes over time to stop people asking deep questions. You're only allowed to ask your questions, like, how do I clean the spark plug? Not why the fuck do we drive cars? There are very clear boundaries that our culture puts on the questions. You're not allowed to ask subversive questions that might bring the whole thing down. You're not allowed to question the system. You can question, how do I run the system? How do I fit in with the system? But you can't ask a question that basically shows that you don't believe in the system. So,
is it, do you, I mean, just while you're on the system there, where was it mentioned somewhere in the posts there about the 36 awakened people from the Jewish, do you write that, Sophie? Yeah. And
no, it was Sam Vaknin in his
oh, it was, yes, that's right, yes. The 36, but I mean, it almost makes a person who's woken up such an unlikely occurrence that they're actually they're the freaks. They're a sort of abnormality. It's such a rare thing.
I don't.
So that 36 thing is, those guys are very naughty to say shit like that. What they're doing is they're kind of boasting. It's not helpful to say shit like that, because really it only takes about 2 years of intensive study in the right environment, in a kind of military intensity, monastic environment. It only takes you about two years to get self-realized. So I've often wondered what I said in the thing, and that's that, in some sense, people do get a deathbed realization. Somebody that's on their deathbed and full of chemicals like DMT and, okay, take a famous example and say like Lord Nelson, when he's lying on the deck there and, everything's getting rather pink tinge, and he's getting a lot of DMT, and he knows he's on the way out, and he says, kiss me, Hardy. And then he's there, he's enlightened. So I kind of wonder often that if people don't, or very often, get deathbed enlightenments, and that leads me to think, well, if 7.8 billion people are about to go extinct, there might be mass enlightenments. I mean, obviously too late. It would really help if they did it earlier, like 1970, and then we would be in great shape. But I think that's mass enlightenments that are just too late.
But to answer what Gary was saying earlier there about people who might be awakened or enlightened, depending on the term you want, and who don't know it, I don't know, in my life of being in contact with a lot of people because of my work, I have come across people, I don't know, who have absolutely, sometimes who could hardly read or write, or people who were living in very remote places, and I felt with them this kind of absence of ego, this kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I felt this kind of, who had it all, and there was no, I don't know, it's something that cannot be really put in words, but it was something I sensed, and I never forgot. And I've seen a lot of them. They were humble people. They were not very educated people. There were not any big pillars of
Yeah.
society, or
No, they're just ordinary.
very, yeah.
Yeah, I've felt the same way. Sometimes I've gone out, or maybe just to the shops, and just interacted with somebody for 30 seconds or a minute. You come back home and you think, I think that person was a Buddha. I mean, it might sound a bit stupid to say it that way, but I come back and I think, my God, there was just something. And yet on the surface of it, it's just some person serving in the shop or sweeping quite often, as you're saying, just somebody, probably not educated, not occupying any social position or anything. But you think, my God, I should have been more careful. I think the Buddha was keeping an eye on me there,
So, are you finished? Because there's something definitely to say about this. So, really, what this is if you use my terminology, then it's all about the alien cortex. So they're people without alien cortexes. So, I've got a friend who's got a kid with Down syndrome, and then she's very into Buddhism, and then she says, her kid's a natural Buddha. Now, you have to make a distinction there, because yes, she's a Buddha because she has no ego and she has no alien cortex, but she doesn't have an alien cortex. The Buddha had an alien cortex. So she might have the demeanor of a Buddha, but she hasn't been transformed like a Buddha. So the Buddha can tell, if you tell Buddha about say Maxwell's equations, then he'll say, yeah, that's the way it is, and he'll be able to embellish it a bit and tell you some things that Maxwell would have loved to have heard. Now, these other people can't do that. So they don't have that kind of transformation, a metamorphosis from the maggot into the butterfly. So it isn't. So what we're talking about, this enlightenment, is a transformation of your alien cortex into a meta-alien cortex. It's kind of like getting a third brain. So if people have a lobotomy, that's not the kind of realization we're talking about. So there are flavors of this, though. It's not completely cut and dried, because if you take somebody like Peter Sellers, right? Peter Sellers, it's a wonderful, wonderful movie called Being There. It was the last movie he made, and I heard Peter Sellers interviewed, and he said that he loved that movie, and he thought it was the apotheosis of his career, because he said, I am that guy. I'm Chauncey Gardner. I've been going through my whole life just winging it, and everybody thinks I'm a genius, but I'm just this humble guy who doesn't see what the problem is. Now, a lot of people have analyzed, a lot of psychologists have analyzed Peter Sellers, and they're fascinated by him because they say it seems semi-autistic. He seems a little bit like Greta in his view of the world and stuff like that, and definitely very remote. It's almost like he's a neutral observer of himself, and that's what made him such a good actor, was he wasn't really there in the sense that we are. We're kind of crap actors because we're thinking, most people are crap actors because they say, oh, what do you want me to do? Whereas somebody like Peter Sellers was never there in the first place. It's not him acting. He's just doing what other people do. So there's if that makes any sense. So that idea of being an observer of yourself is a large part of it. So it's kind of like stepping out of yourself and getting metacognition. Now, a lot of these simpler folk that don't have alien cortexes, they don't always have metacognition. Now, you have to hedge this in, because the only reason why we can actually get enlightened and reach enlightenment is because the structure of the universe is kind of fractal, or it's kind of like a hologram. And so we kind of have the idea of self-knowledge, the Platonic idea of, what is it called? Amniosis, or whatever, but anyway, that we have all the knowledge inside us. The reason why we have the knowledge inside us is because the universe is not haphazard. It has these kind of recurring fractal patterns, and it's kind of algorithmic. So we have almost Platonic solids inside. We have all these elements of logic that recur and repeat, and they're self-similar, and these patterns come up. So it's in a person that's really kind of pure of heart, they can reflect all those back and be, basically reflect the universe and its intelligence in that way. They're kind of like naturally spewing out archetypes, because that's what we're doing. A lot of people, just the people that are not enlightened, they just got a crap version of an archetype. They're kind of like a proto-human being that's not quite baked yet. Shit, I hope I haven't said anything really bad in all of that.
No, I don't know. I was going to ask you, because you just touched very briefly on suicide back there, ego suicide. I'll just say this for what it's worth. I don't know if you want to pursue it, but I was thinking about three different forms, three different deaths. The first one was the sort of noble deaths of the Greek army that you spoke about, how they were unbelievably outnumbered and they just went ahead anyway. In this kind of,
yeah.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, so you described that as a particular example of this kind of selfless, I suppose, where they were just doing the right thing because that's what you do, and I was trying to compare that with two other things. One was that fellow who suicided in the court in the Hague. I'll get his name in a minute. Slobodan Praljak, the Bosnian general, and he drank.
No,
Praljak, I think it was.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Now there's that example, and I was also thinking about something like Chelsea Manning or Julian Assange, who are going to end up locked in a concrete box with the stainless steel toilet bowl and a fluorescent light forever. And, in that sort of situation, they might suicide. Now, I mean, you've made the comment earlier about, well, that's sort of unripe to suicide. But it seemed like there's more going on than that. I mean, those Greeks, they could have just run away, or they in a way, they were choosing the manner of their own death. And in a way, the fellow in that courtroom was sort of, in a way, I was kind of attracted to that because it was kind of anarchistic in the way there was the authority of the court. And he was more or less, even though it was a very alien cortex egotistical thing in a way that he was doing, in another way he was saying, no, up to you, I absolutely don't accept your authority. You don't have authority over me, and I'm going to prevent you from exercising it. I'm going to show you in the end that your authority is not recognised and is not valid. Again, I suppose you could say that with a possible scenario of Assange locked in his cell for the rest of his life, They're just trying to make sense of the three scenarios in terms of what you'd said about ripeness. And that in those cases, it's not necessarily unripe to bump yourself off in some kind of totally hopeless situation.
You see, now there's a slight difference here. So
I'm sure there is. That's what I'm hoping you'll address.
Yeah. So let's address the one where you do to escape justice, and basically it's a power move to commit suicide. So that's what Goering did, and that's what Hitler did, and Goebbels and all of them. Is basically Goering at the Nuremberg trials. They managed, somebody somehow, I don't think they still know how it was done, but somebody managed to slip in some suicide pills. The point of committing suicide after you've already been condemned to death is a snub to the Allies to say basically, now I win. I have the last laugh because I have control over my own death. That's Fisher, the guy who did all the primary work on altruistic genetics and basically the originator of the selfish gene and all the stuff about altruism was he committed suicide like that with basically a tiny pair of scissors, and the reason he cut his artery, and the reason why he did it it's a very, very dangerous part of why this is such a dangerous game of the alien cortex in its final throes. What it's doing is it's saying, okay, if I can't win, nobody wins, is what it's really saying. And this is what, you know, I really, really wish if I could communicate one thing to people, that we have a meta alien cortex, and this is going to happen on a grand scale. We're going to die unripe because of a suicide, exactly like Hitler's. So I keep on saying it, and I can hear that nobody can hear what I'm saying. But you know, Hitler did it. He loved Germany, and in his death throes, he ordered the deliberate annihilation of the German people. And the reason is that he has no ego boundary. He is, you know, it's like he is the state. It's like I am the state, you know, Louis the 14th. It's like that. He's lost during his career. Hitler lost his ego boundary between the nation and himself completely. And so he can kill a whole nation, and he had the means to do it too, which is the frightening thing. He can kill a whole nation because he's dying. Now, his conception of himself was an unripe one. I mean, a nation and Hitler, and that's an abstraction. It's as bad as any identity politics that you can think up. So it's a tremendous, tremendous abomination of enlightenment. It's almost like enlightenment, but it's as a miss is as good as a mile. You really have to do what Hitler did, but then you have to be such a bastard that you're not even going to let your alien cortex kill itself. So does that make any sense? I'm done with this. Like, fuck the world. The German people don't deserve to live. It's all over. I'm going to kill myself and the German people too. And I'm such a bastard. I'm going to make them just have to endure being hung by the Allies. That's what a bastard is. So it's kind of like you have to be such a bastard that you become decent in the end.
Can you elaborate on the term meta alien cortex?
Meta. So a collective alien cortex.
Yeah,
so
so that's what you're defining there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So basically, because the universe is self-similar all the way down, and it's all turtles all the way down, it's basically we are almost like a hologram, each one of us. It's a very false analogy, this piece of the truth thing. This Ken Wilber, we each have a piece of the truth, is horse shit. It's exactly the same. The Quakers did it too. We each have our piece of the truth. Then we all get together, we contribute our truth, and it fits together like a little mosaic. This is complete misunderstanding. It's also quite a dangerous one in a lot of respects. That's not how we constructed. We constructed like a hologram. What's interesting about a hologram is if you get a normal picture painted on glass or something, and you break it into 10 pieces, you will have 10 fragments of the picture. Now, that's most people's conception of knowledge. We each contribute a bit, and that we have our own truth. And that's a horrible relativism. If you actually get a hologram and break it up, what you find is each one of those pieces is the complete picture. It's a remarkable thing about it. If you ask us, a physicist, how does a hologram do that? Basically, at the end of the conversation, you'll know absolutely that physicists haven't got a fucking clue. They don't understand light. They don't understand holograms. And they don't even understand that they don't understand them. But that really is the way the universe works, is that we are a complete reflection of the hologram. So when you put us together, you make a bigger hologram. when you take us apart, you just have a smaller hologram. But each one of them is complete. They might be distorted. They might have bits missing. Okay, granted. But in essence, that's the better way to see it. So we have a complete alien cortex, and combined, we have this meta-intelligence, and then Gladwell and that gets all excited because, we've discovered the wisdom of crowds. If you make a big discovery like the wisdom of crowds, you can bet your ass you're an idiot. Because if you go back to the ancient Greeks or something, you'll see they said exactly that. You were just too stupid to understand them. So it's a good, anybody that comes up with we just made this big discovery, you can bet your ass that they're stupid as fuck. Because so that's the reason is there's this strange fractal quality, self-similarity, and it's it's involuted. We have an involuted brain, and so you can mix and match. You can have a collective mind and stuff like that, which everybody knew since the year dot. I mean, Gladwell, if you talk to the San people or something, they'd think he was batshit crazy. They'd think like, why did you think it was somewhere different? It's like, no, we did a long excursion into La La Land. Then we come back and go, well, we've discovered the wisdom of crowds. And it's like, no, you've just been out of the room a long time.
Here, I still want to drag it back to earlier in the conversation. I mean, you mentioned the sort of monastic military setting, that a young person might be placed in, and that would be a good environment to sort of bring on their ego dissolution. The reality of most people's lives is they're not in that setting. And I'm just wondering, because like in your life, as I see it, I mean, you went to a public, one of those rather horrible schools, which were rather militaristic, and then you were actually in the military, and you were in the cult, which was quite, as I understand it, quite regimented. And so you had a lot of that pre-existing in your life. It was very much kind of your trajectory. And so that was your mode of being, you were in that mode. You were sort of in that militaristic, monastic environment where somebody could put that pressure on your ego. But most people aren't. And they're not going to be. And for the ordinary person who's just floating around in the kind of society we're living in, how are they going to create that kind of threat or pressure on their ego, if I can put it that way? Because it's just going to be a case of their ego setting up something to challenge their ego. It's going to become a bit of a silly game. It's just because it's within the person.
This is why I fear for the planet, because you can still, if you want that, you can go and find it. You can go and join the Rinzai school in Japan, and you can meditate while some guy walks and slaps you on the back with a stick. The problem is that if you want it, it's there. You can find it. You can go to an ashram up in the Himalayas, and you can get the treatment. The reason why it has to be so militaristic and why it can't be just Chembendel and you sit down and say, why can't we just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and you get realized that way. The reason is, and now I've got to develop some state secrets here, but it's really to do with sexual energy. The only reason why you can do it is because of abstinence, sexual abstinence. It's really, you're transmuting sexual energy into psychic energy to the extent that you actually have a breakdown. So you can only do it if you, like, for about 2 years or so, you have a regime of about 4 hours sleep, intense meditation, intense study, chanting, exercise. It's basically Olympic training. But if you want, you can do it. You can find it. It's lots of places you can go to do it. The trouble is,
in jail.
What's that?
I said you can do it in jail.
They do. They do. They do. A lot of black guys come out of in America. They come out of jail like they've come out of a university, and in a lot of ways it is. But you see, that's worth mentioning because the guys in Robben Island, the guys that eventually took over the government, Mandela and his cadres and comrades in Robben Island, they took a communal garden, Devil's Island, and they turned it into a university. The prisoners took control of that island, and basically, in the end, the guards were students in their university. So it's a tremendous accomplishment. Now, the problem is that because of relativism and domestication and this extreme pacifism and learned helplessness, and the psychological profession has been doing a tremendous disservice here. These life coaches and fake gurus and these cult leaders, and they're just cadres of people that are making people, basically they're ruining people's appetite